People who've interacted with a psychopath. What made you realize they were one? Before we start, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next videos. I wish you a pleasant viewing experience. Story 1. I told this story once before. I met a woman at a party who gave me this kind of chilling suspicion. She was sociable and easily commanded to attention of every small gathering she was in. She leaned on the woes of her job to keep the conversation about her. She was a nurse working in the maternity ward, and she went on about the hours and the pay and everything. To change the vibe, I asked her what she liked about her job, and she lit up. But what she said didn't come down to her coworkers, or helping people, or making a difference. Her answer amounted to power. She absolutely glowed as she described how fragile new mothers are and how many subtle things could go wrong. She was proud to say how she knew when a mother wasn't going to make it through the night without complications, and how she was the only nurse on the floor to be the one that could help the mother. She loved how she was in control over a precious and delicate thing that could not be replaced. I remember feeling deeply uncomfortable by her answer and that smile of hers. I still remember that smile. Others around us at the time picked up on it too. Answer. Another part of this person's conversation, an anecdote she shared. She was in choir in school and wanted desperately to be in the advanced classes. She auditioned but was rejected. This led to her taking private classes. In her senior year, the chorus teacher died, and it was a major upset in the community. She auditioned and was chosen to sing at the teacher's funeral. On paper, while writing this, it seems odd but otherwise harmless turn of events, albeit grim and unfortunate. But it was that smile she had when she told that story. She was so proud to sing at that teacher's funeral. Story 2. I've worked with teenagers my entire career, and am fairly well versed in how mental illnesses can show up with middle high school kids. We had one kid, let's call him Evan, not real name. I generally understand why kids are popular, but this kid befuddled me. He wasn't charismatic in the hallway. He wasn't a party kid, he wasn't athletic, he wasn't funny, and he certainly wasn't kind. This kid always had fanfare and would pick out one other male peer and essentially friend love, bomb them. He'd build these emotional bonds with them and then totally use it for his benefit. He would pick a teacher and mercilessly torment them. For example, for creative writing, he wrote about how a character in his story named Kevin, again, not real but very close, had gone to a teacher's house that happened to have a dog like the teacher had, and he wrote graphically about how he tortured it, not eliminated, but tortured it. Had changed details just to tease enough and say he was mimicking Vonnegut or something like that. When he got disciplined for it, he had the current favored male peer talk sense into the teacher. Yeah, this friend ended up getting suspended BC. That talking sense just was threats to protect Evan. When the friend came back from suspension, his mom asked everyone to try to keep him away from Evan. Evan got in no trouble, BC. He didn't think this friend would get aggressive. Yes, he did. It was constant, and eventually he was placed in my class. He tried the old essay to scare the teacher thing again. He wrote about how a character not named Evan, but something mighty close, knew where a teacher that sounded like me lived and was planning on burning my house down with her entire family in it. The next day I read it out loud to the class and asked them to give him feedback all together during class. He didn't like that at all, especially BC. The girls who knew nothing of this drama before were horrified and deemed him a creep that they didn't like. He ended up moving the next year, and he is an adult, 18 now. Every now and then I Google his name, BC. I truly don't know what damage a person that operates that effectively can do. Answer, yes, teacher here, and also taught a psychopath. This particular one love-bombed the teachers while tormenting his peers. However, once the teachers got to know him, they absolutely dislike him. Bleeding heart-type teachers, who always stood up for the troubled kids, would unequivocally say he was a horrible person. I was shocked to hear them say that because he seemed so nice when I first taught him and was a leader in the classroom. My first sign something was wrong was when none of the girls liked him. He was a mature-looking, handsome, well-developed middle school boy who seemed 100 like the kind of guy they'd all have huge crushes on, but they all dislike him and got uncomfortable when they had to work with him. I found out he was subtly whispering super nasty things to them and even physically harming them anytime he could make it possibly look like an accident. Then we found out that he had volunteered to help out in younger classrooms, like K2, so he could physically abuse those kids when nobody was looking. He was cool and calm about these things, never showing any remorse. Then he became obsessed with the military, saying he hoped to join so he could eliminate people. He never seemed angry or depressed when he said these things, but chillingly calm and cruel. His eyes would light up and he'd smile, but there was just nothing there. His adoptive parents were called in for a conference, and they said they are scared of him. They even sent him to a boarding school the next year because of how frightened they were. I've taught a lot of troubled students, even some that don't seem to have consciences and don't feel guilty about hurting others. This guy was in a league by himself, though. He was definitely future serial killer material, while even the worst troubled kids I've worked with are probably just on the level of being crappy members of society. Story 3. My former spouse. She was charming, charismatic, beautiful, manipulative, pathological liar, emotionally and financially abusive. I dropped her off at the hospital so she could take over watching her mom to give her aunt and uncle a reprieve. Aunt and uncle informed me ML was doing well. I drove home. She called me 20 minutes later to say her mom suddenly died. She smothered her mother to passing. After our divorce, I met with her stepmom and SIL to talk about things. Unsolicited, they said they believed she smothered her mom. I nodded my head in agreement. Answer: my ex-wife was also one. Never eliminate anyone that I know of, but it wouldn't surprise me. I never saw it until I was divorcing her. Everyone was expendable if it would help her regain the narrative. I believe she tried to push our autistic son to commit tragic end so that she could play the sympathy card. He has been tragic end for years, and she started calling him names, swearing at him, and treating him like shoot. She openly told everyone he was the reason why she attempted tragic end, because he told her he wished she was dead while angry. Story 4. Used to work as a mental health nurse, so saw people with diagnosed psychopathic traits. The thing that got me were their eyes. They could have the most brilliant, dazzling smile and have a contagious laugh, but their eyes were just flat, empty, lifeless. Sent chills down my spine every time. Answer: I was going to say, you can often tell with the eyes. My childhood friend has a best friend who is a psychopath. He has dead eyes. He has been involved in several violent events, knocking out someone who was ostensibly a friend, hitting a disabled person in the head with a knife on her. I am 50 convinced he shot his father in the head. He was violent towards his stepchildren. I avoid him like the plague. Story 5. It took years for me to realize, but eventually saw that they never spoke a single word from their mouth that wasn't intended to manipulate and control others. Every single conversation and interaction was manufactured and not genuine. No genuine version of that person exists. They also took every opportunity to subtly put people down if they were threatened by them. Made people, including me, doubt ourselves deeply. Also, everything they did to control and manipulate others had plausible deniability because they were so clever and careful about it. Everything was done in between the lines, so it was hard to prove. Eventually, those people almost always give themselves away, though, in my opinion, experience. Answer: oh man, this is one of my sisters. I thought she was maybe a covert narcissist. The manipulation has always been off the charts with her, and then the feigned offense when called out on her bullshit. The older I get, the more I see these traits as common throughout the population. It's like people are so much more concerned with their image than actually having integrity and are completely different underneath all of the posturing. Story 6. I used to work for one. Every sincere, vulnerable moment was fabricated to prompt me to share my story, so he could collect information to use against me. He used to get upset that he was so open with me, and I was like a brick wall. Sir, I'm at work. He told me he used to live in London, his marriage open, and he was lining up dates on his business trips, how he used to be romantically involved with his last assistant when they would travel together. He keeps his parents on payroll to help them out, etc. None of it true, except him having blatant affairs. He would name drop people of influence saying so, and so was an old friend, just compulsively lying to make himself seem important. He would fabricate dramatic situations that were my fault, so he would have an excuse to scream, literally at me. Like wording a phrase just wrong enough that I would misstep. His eyes would go absolutely black. I started questioning when I met someone close to him in his personal life and was asking, oh, was that when he lived in the UK? Insert confused expression. I got coffee with his former assistant, and she told me she had never traveled with him, let alone had an affair with him. It was all a lie. I screenshot him making really obscene intimacy comments towards me on Slack. Still not sure what to do with it all. Obviously, I don't work for him anymore. To say I had PTSD would be dramatic, but the emotional whiplash of someone being manipulative and having power over you left me scarred in unexpected ways for a long time. Now I just see him as a tiny piece of shoot. Answer: his eyes would go absolutely black. I've heard this so many times about deeply fudge up evil people. I think it's a more biological, only a lunatic smiles when they're angry. One of the only things a person can't fake is pupillary response. Our eyes dilate when we see something we like. When a human being who is not completely fudge pathological is angry, looking at a person they're intimidating and get to scream at, they're not having such a good time that their pupils are blown like the rest of us get with intimacy and certain substances. Story 7. I have a sibling who is a psychopath. They are just empty. They try thing after thing after thing to fill the emptiness and move on to harming people or themselves when they can't. And there's an uncanny valley quality to them because of the emptiness. They do not respond in a normal, expected way to anything. They are cold, like someone doing an impression of a human. They're good at acting and putting on the charm, but most people catch a whiff of something that's not right, something off and strange. So most of their relationships are entirely superficial. It's very much a you know it when you see it situation. You know in your bones something is wrong and your brain says, run, even if you're having a totally banal conversation. And they have always been like this. They've just gotten better at acting to fool whoever they need to. Answer. There was this guy who was popular around town a few years ago, ran his own stand-up variety night, popular with ladies, and every time I was around him, my blood just ran cold. He could charm a room and had good comedic timing and could banter with anyone, but something just felt wrong in a very dark way. He wound up dating one of my good friends, against my advice and later my pleas, and did horrible shoot to her. She wound up going public with it on social media, and a whole wave of other women came forward. He was grooming high school girls, cheating basically nonstop, and abusing whichever partner he was dating, Red moving into mooch off of. It's one of those things where being vindicated obviously felt like shoot, and you can't blame anyone who got suckered in, even with me saying, vague shoot about how you should make sure you are never alone with him. Because to this day, I still don't know what it was about him that unsettled me. There's no way I could articulate any kind of specific, logical warning about him. He just felt off, and vibes-based discrimination seems like at least as dangerous of a path to go down. Story 8. I fell in love with this guy who did a lot of intense sports, dangerous stuff, all the time. I went through a seriously traumatic event when on my way to meet him for vacation. He had been so charming and made a lot of grand romantic gestures back then. He impulsively got us tickets to a cruise. I got to town a day before him to visit family. I went out with friends the night before he arrived. Things went way wrong. When he got off the plane, he found out that I had been attacked. Instead of coming to me at the police station, he told me I should have fought harder and had ruined his vacation. He went on the cruise without me, went straight to the ship and didn't even bother to see me. Broke my heart at one of the lowest moments of my life. When we got to talk about it later, I told him I had noticed his lack of empathy, thrill-seeking, impulsive behavior. I had also noticed that he was always happy. He looked at me without a mask for a moment and told me I was very observant. It was chilling. He could move so easily from this charming guy who seemed almost altruistic to someone I didn't recognize. Story 9. Everything is a lie. They lie to themselves, and the grandiose facade is so complex and deeply rooted in them that you believe it too at first. Their words do not line up with their actions or reality. Everything is a way to make themselves look better than everyone else or to put others down and thus themselves higher. They view people as a means to an end, can be extremely charming, outgoing, fun on the surface, but there is literally zero depth beyond. It's quite sad when I realized they sure do know how to reel people in, tell them what they want to hear, and sell this image of themselves. Story 10. Eerie. Talked to a guy online who after 2 weeks of conversation told me sometimes that he wanted to eliminate someone just to see what it felt like in random conversation, and told me that when he was younger, he had a plan for eliminate a girl in his class he thought was annoying and that no one would miss. Could he have been an edgelord? Maybe. However, I am not taking my chances. Pretty sure he was literally psychopathic. Answer. My friend was just telling me the other day that she met a guy online. They met up for a date, and during this date, he made several jokes about eliminate her. She asked him to stop because, of course. The next day, he wants to set up another date, and she says she's not comfortable with that and doesn't want to see him again. He actually said, I stopped joking when you asked me to. What's the problem? Story 11. He told me an elaborate story of how his puppy got out, and when he found it, it had been attacked by something, so he had to eliminate it to end its suffering. Months later, after our relationship ended, I found it. He actually just left it in his apartment with no food or water to die. He is now in prison for, I actually don't know what, but it involved children. It's the closest thing I've encountered that screams psychopath. Looking back, the list is long and a huge reason for much of my trauma. Story 12. I am technically still married to one, although we have been no contact for over 3 years. I can name 1,000 different things, but I will stick to one in the interest of time. One night, one of many similar nights, we argued, and he assaulted me. Generally, this meant him biting me and choking me. I was at perhaps the lowest point in my life. Brainwashed, gaslighted, torn down, so I got up the next morning and decided to make the best of it. I cooked all day and he stayed in the bedroom. I remember listening to music and just really being in a good mood. I made his favorite dinner and brought it to him in the bedroom. He was looking at his phone. I said, "I made your favorite dinner," and he looked at me and said, "You're so simple." That moment changed my life. It was a gift because I left the next day and never looked back. Answer: this kind of shows how kindness and forgiveness can protect yourself. It's easy in the chaos of life to feel like some reactions and behaviors are warranted or just part of the traumatic fabric of a person. But when you encounter someone with genuine kindness and forgiveness, and they react with nothing but disdain, you get definite proof of their callous nature. Reminds me of the story of a friend about her father. Her parents had a shaky relationship, and from outside it was hard for her to take a stance. Until one day, the mom baked him a cake randomly, just as a sheer act of love. He looked at it for a second and then threw the cake in the trash. My friend said that was the moment she realized, although her mom wasn't a saint, at least she wasn't a monster. Story 13. My now dead husband. He created scenes as proof of cheating in order to allow him to assault me, then admit he planted the false evidence, etc. He blatantly lied when telling stories to his friends that would make him seem heroic or funny. He actually would be smugly happy when his friends or family suffered a downfall, but act concerned to their faces. List could go forever, but yeah, fudge him. Story 14. They put on a mask all the time. They treat a specific group of people they deem weak horribly while trying to maintain a good image with anybody else. The closet PPL to them will describe them completely different than a colleague or a stranger they just met. And before you say everyone is like that, no, this is very different. Answer: there's a guy at my work like that. I've got pretty good hearing. He came in once and said something to Adam, not his real name, and laughed with him at something, or more likely someone. Then he walked by my desk, talked trash about Adam and told me he only talked to Adam to laugh at him and egg him on. Then he went around the corner and talked to Sue, and talked shoot about me to Sue. After Sue left, he went into his supervisor and started mocking Sue to her. Later I found out from the ITs that they no longer spoke to him because he was always ragging on one of them with other. He's still there, but most people don't talk to him except for a handful of people in management. Story 15. Psychiatrist here. I've met several men with true antisocial personality disorder through my work. No women yet, and it is truly unsettling. Some of their earliest diagnostic behaviors include eliminate animals as children. Although it had often progressed to violence toward other people, I will keep the details vague for anonymity. There is indeed often a legal history for those that make it to the inpatient unit, but a lot of these people in the general public can be extremely charismatic and successful. Answer: you're describing my 21-year-old daughter. She was even strangling her newborn sister at 5 years old, then went to school bragging about it. Attempted multiple PRTF facilities over the years, and they'd always discharged saying they couldn't help her. Fast forward, and she was recently committed to the state psychiatric hospital. As a mom, it's a relief because she's not only a threat to herself, but society. She's always gotten a thrill off causing others pain, especially me. Now that she cannot control my mental health, her lies and stories are really out there. Everything is always everyone else's fault, never takes accountability, and she's always the victim. My 16-year-old and myself are finally working through our PTSD she's caused us all these years. Story 16. Oh, this one is easy. I didn't realize he was one at first. We actually dated for 3 months, and I thought he might have high-functioning autism or something. Like, I noticed he reacted to things different. He was really cute, and we had a lot of the same hobbies. He liked to climb, so I kind of ignored it, but the longer we were together, I would notice little things, like he would feign when he thought he was supposed to be upset about something. He would know it was an upsetting thing, but only when he realized I noticed or other people noticed would he have tears or act sad. He hit a wolf one time when we were on the way to a camping spot in northern Idaho, and that was when I really saw it. He took a life and didn't even react. I know some people just don't think animals are important, but he didn't even swerve the car or react at all. He said it should have known better to cross the road, and I cried because, to me, hitting a wolf was traumatic, and I wasn't even the one driving. They are beautiful creatures, and he looked right at me stone cold and said, "You are ruining my weekend by crying. I need you to stop right now." I broke up with him as soon as we got home. I was too afraid to do it in the woods. Answer: I dated a guy like this. I thought he had high-functioning autism as well, but I was wrong, and I apologize to people with autism for thinking that, as they are some of the most thoughtful people I've met in my life. I was with him long enough to have a few different examples. I caught him practicing facial expressions in the mirror a few times, which was odd, but the most disturbing time, though, was when he was reenacting almost verbatim our conversation from earlier in the day, when I told him a friend of mine may have breast cancer and I was really worried. He was quietly repeating the lines he and I had said to each other, mostly focusing on pretending to be me. He was very, frustratedly confused about my dog. Jealous even? It's the only way I can describe him when I had to leave to take care of her, chatted about her, or interacted with her when he came over. Twice he felt comfortable enough to ask me why I'd invest in an animal that doesn't add value or benefit my life in a practical way. It's a waste of time and money. When I explained that I loved her and her existence was valuable for its own sake, didn't make sense to him. My dog wasn't affectionate to him like she was with everyone else, but she wasn't afraid nor aggressive towards him. However, I did keep an eye out. He had a family dog growing up and never experienced a dog attack either. We were walking down the street one evening to get dinner when we came upon a bad accident. A bike courier had been hit by a car. The groceries they'd been delivering were even laying in the courier's blood that had pooled onto the road, and the courier was still on the ground while paramedics were working on them. It was extremely shocking and sad to say the absolute least. People around us were crying and praying, and because the police had blocked off the entire intersection, we had to turn around and walk a different way to the restaurant. I remember this next interaction between us vividly, and it scares me to this day. I'd openly expressed worry, sadness, fear, and hope for the person laying in the street, but in a very deadpan tone of voice, my ex coldly stated how incredibly inconvenient it was that we now had to reroute to the restaurant, going as far as to say he didn't understand why everyone's this upset about something that's at most really annoying. It's not like they know him. I looked at him in disbelief, expecting him to at least look angry, which would have been bad enough. Instead, he turned to look me in the eyes, and I saw the most empty expression I'd ever seen on a person. It made my blood run cold, like every survival alarm inside me went off all at once. The sheer indifference and lack of empathy was so palpable, and I think he knew that I seen through him, because he finally looked upset. Only it was towards me, and told me that I better not let this ruin our evening, took my hand, and basically dragged me to the restaurant. These were the most we broke up after the car accident, but there were lots of little things that I could add to the list that make sense in hindsight. However, I think it's important to end on how extremely normal, even charming, their behavior is 99% of the time. Even if you've just met them and they seem off to you, you don't really have any evidence to support it until they say or do something off, which ends up happening after you're already well within their circle of influence. And if you're already close enough to them to see or experience an instance of troubling behavior, you're more likely to clock it as a quirk of theirs, a miscommunication, misunderstanding of yours, etc., and give them the benefit of the doubt because, well, up until that point, they've been nothing but normal, funny, nice, cool, even generous to you. They're just a little weird or particular. Story 17. Dude had a couple people bowing down on their knees in front of him, praying through him to Jesus or something. He was really good at reading people and manipulating them, Charles Manson type stuff. Story 18. I like to think I'm pretty good at reading people, but they'd stare at me sometimes when we were in bed together, and I'd simultaneously feel like they cared for me and that they were about to attack me at the same second. I could never fully read that look behind their eyes. It was like it was ebbing and flowing between love and dislike. It would create this push and pull in my gut where I was drawn to them, but afraid of them. I started to catch out lies. I watched their movements change when no one was looking. Every word was calculated to manipulate something or someone. Their emotions were mimicking others rather than their own. I got out before they hurt me, and in the process found out what they'd done to many, many others. If you're reading this, you and your sibling should be in jail. Both of you should play in traffic. Story 19. I work in a prison and have dealt with literal psychopaths diagnosed and all that. The best way I can describe it and keep in mind this is coming from someone who knew what they were going in. There is something missing in their brain. Like you can see it in their eyes that there is a void behind them. And when they talk to you, it's just a big game. I'm not talking, oh, that's a lack of empathy, which it is, but an emptiness that just is not natural. Like inmates plays games, lies, manipulation, playing dumb to see what you know. It's part of their world. But with them, there is a lot of deliberation and measuring in their interactions with you that just doesn't exist with regular inmates. Like they are sizing you up, and man, you got to be very aware of what they are doing and just go along with it, sticking to policy, procedure, and your job. They love control and they are trying to get some of it with you, and you have to not allow it. Story 20. I lived a few years in a state mental hospital where I lived on the same ward with one. She outright said to me that she was a diagnosed psychopath, but in reality, that's not a diagnostic term. She most likely was diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder. Anyway, she would say or do anything as a means to an end. If she wanted something, she'd go for it. Relationships, intimacy, cigarettes, clothes, food. Everybody and everything was dispensable to get what she wanted, and often at a moment's notice. A lot of the patients had been used at some point by her for something. Another fun thing about her was she would self-harm by swallowing objects. She had a ton of deep scars on her stomach where they had to surgically remove potentially deadly items. I watched her as she swallowed long wires she had dug out from the patient phone, and she once swallowed the batteries from my CD player when I wasn't looking. Good times. Story 21. This was about 12 years ago. I may have met more, but I know I've seen one who received a diagnosis. He came in with handcuffs in, and the resident psych pointed and said, "Actually diagnosed about 5 years ago. I saw him from a distance and had no interaction with him. History of violent crime. Recently released for time served." I think he'd been out about 6 months and had just attempted to take down a child, but the child survived because he was caught in the act by a parent and beaten badly. He was talking amiably with a detective as if the handcuffs in his wrist weren't even there. We were all freaking out because the detective seemed really charmed by him and was matching his light, friendly energy. Answer: I've seen serial murderers interviewed by detectives who appear to really enjoy their company. Detectives do it on purpose. It's an act to put the criminal at ease so they feel like they're talking to a friend. Then court day comes. The detective uses every single word shared in friendship by the murderer against them, which increases the chance of a conviction and time they'll serve. The detective might never speak to them again after conviction, bearing further investigation. I agree, O'Reilly. It looks perverse that a detective would smile at a murderer, but there is nothing friendly behind the smile. Likely something a psychopath understands well. Story 22. He was charming the first 2 years, but once we got engaged, he locked in. Controlled all my money, friends. Time outside of the apartment. It took a physical altercation that I successfully defended myself from to escape. I mean, he had everything from me possession-wise and social-wise. It happened so fast, too. When I got away a few years later and he did a week in jail and some anger classes, I saw him again, and he smiled and came up to me like nothing ever happened. I literally stared him dead jerk in the eyes. It was a public Panera Bread, and just said firmly, nope, and left. And he didn't follow me. That was years ago. Story 23. Years and years and years ago, when I was in my early 20s dating, casually I met up with a guy who was a highway patrol police officer. He had previously worked in intelligence for the Air Force and was telling me various stories, but what got me was his story about his favorite thing to do at his current job. He told me his favorite shift is the morning shift, as it is during the peak morning work traffic, and he loves to look out for people who he can tell are in a rush. They aren't breaking the law or speeding per se, but he can just tell that they are running late or have something very important on, so he will pull them over and take as long as possible to run all their information, fudge them around and create more stress for them. He had the widest smile, and his eyes were just manic as he was telling me all this. He finishes it off with something like, "Yeah, just knowing I've completely fudged up someone's entire day brings me more joy than anything in the Air Force." A tiny example, but I'll never forget it. Story 24. I work at a residential psych unit. A guy lives there who was found NGUR for eliminate a family member 20 years ago. Supposedly cured of his psychosis, he was allowed to step down. The day he came, he was so superficial and scripted and fake charming. I was like, nope. Has a psychopath who convinced everyone he had plant substance-induced psychosis. Story 25. Watching them learn how to mimic genuine empathy, then weaponize it. Just this one person, though, fortunately. Story 26. Former manager. I realized that he would literally work me to passing, and his only problem with that would be finding a replacement. 17 people in that company left within 6 months of him joining. People were crying at their desks. He implemented a ban on the dev team communicating with the marketing team. He secretly has our IT systems modified so he could read our emails and use that to attack us. Imagine feeling like someone's knee is on your throat all day, every day. That struggle to breathe, the weight crushing you. Several of us developed anxiety and depression as a result of working under him. There was a time after a group of us had quit that we started discussing retaliation. Nobody said the actual words, but we all knew what we meant. Even though I very much wanted retaliation too, I convinced them that our best retaliation was to move on and be successful. As it happens, 13 years later, I am working with two of the same guys and we're absolutely smashing it and working in a great place with great conditions. But I still have to convince myself not to find him and retaliate. Story 27. This person hasn't been diagnosed, but I strongly suspect she is. She can be very charming superficially, good at ensnaring, luring people in, and very believable in spinning a good story to get people to side with her and believe what she's saying. She has very limited emotional range. It's just fake happiness, contentment, and rage. There is nothing in between. Can also fake cry on command, which I find very disturbing. She does it to the cops whenever her partner and her have had a DV incident. I usually believe most women when they say they are victims, but not her. She is cunning and evil. She has gotten away with her behavior her whole life, and I don't see it changing. She knows how to manipulate people into bowing to her demands, and if they don't, she flies into a rage where she attempts to physically harm them. Also, if you don't side with her, you're against her, and she will launch a campaign into smearing your name and reputation. Story 28. They are incredibly selfish, but they don't make you feel they are being selfish. Instead, you eventually see they don't care about you, and that when they do nice things, it's actually for themselves more than you. You are easily ignored when you have no value left for them. I suppose that some of these people are good in that they can move on from you and you can just completely forget about them, even though you are related. Story 29. My mother. She's very good at hiding herself, very charming, smart and pretty. Appearances are the most important thing to her. I'm her oldest child, so I was the one that got the most abuse. We are 3 daughters, all smart, never got into trouble, never did substances. Yet she loved to make up stories about us to other adults about how bad we were, right in front of us. Honestly, don't know why. Wouldn't you want people to know your kids are great? It got to the point that we would call her out to her face while she would say her stories. She also disliked my husband just because we are high school sweethearts, and I quote, "He's a lower class than we are. She's all sweet around extended family, and no one really sees who she really is. We are low contact now because of her hatred of my husband and horrible things she's done to him. I've started to tell a select few extended family how and who she really is. I'm tired of everyone telling me how amazing my mother is. No, she is not. If she wasn't married to my dad, I would never speak to her again. I know this is late to the thread, but it felt good to get it out there." Story 30. I think for me it was how charming, outgoing, and kind he was to others. One time we went down to the woods by our houses, and I found a wild rabbit with a bite mark in it, but it was still alive. I picked it up and was trying to wrap my sweater around it. During this, I kept the rabbit on the floor on top of my bag, and he shot it dead, right there, in front of me. While I was trying to save it, he thought it was the funniest thing ever, and that was the day I decided to leave. Story 31. I was told prior to meeting them that they were diagnosed with psychopathy. It was a situation where they were talking to my coworker, and I was supposed to observe. It was like seeing through glass. The person was there, but there was no substance. The words and mannerisms were right, but there was no personality, no source. It's hard to explain. Story 32. I am diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder, commonly known as psychopathy. The way to catch a psychopath is in the details of what they tell you. We ASPDers like to come up with elaborate lies to paint ourselves in certain lights. You might not focus on the details because you trust someone, but you need to do that when someone has ASPD. The tiny details will be inconsistent or won't make sense. Focus on them and make the psychopath explain them. Story 33. Extremely manipulative, everything self-serving, but can spin a story any which way to get what he wanted and have people be very loyal to him. He was smart and could adapt and play almost anything to his favor. I think looking back, it was the only thing that really excited him. He pathologically lied, like it was a game to him, even about mundane stuff. Would lie to create drama or pity for himself when needed. This guy flew women into his place from all over the world, telling each he was in love with them. He dropped one at the airport and would swing around to the next gate to pick up another. He loved getting women to trust him, and it was a victory for him to get someone to leave their partner. He would throw people away, like they were nothing afterward. His entire life was a lie, and I'm sure he's still causing mayhem in the lives of others, particularly brunette women. Story 34. It ran in his family, and he was always worried I'd find out what he'd become one day, but he already was one, because he was so cruel. Every plan to help or impress me had some ulterior motive of purposely making me insecure or diminishing me in some way. He also thought eliminate pets were no big deal, and he always tried to tower over me and pretend to be angry to intimidate me. Story 35. He told me eliminate a puppy once, just to see what it was like. I knew things weren't right based on other stuff he said, but that was the final straw. Story 36. They told me they didn't see people as individuals, proven by the fact they took everything they could from someone before ditching them. They crashed my car and dipped LOL. Charming as fudge though, kinda scary. Story 37. He was my friend in high school. He literally saw himself as an apex predator. He was kind of a weird guy in general, but it was high school. We were all a little weird, but he was one of the most selfish people I've ever met and would creep out any girl we got near. He would always make jokes about how he could just eliminate someone if he wanted to, and they wouldn't be able to do anything about it. Anytime he tried to be emotional with someone, it always felt really fake and forced, and it was typically an attempt at manipulation. Honestly, he was a fun guy to talk to when we talked about video games and such. But being a teenager, I just completely ignored so many red flags. It wasn't until college, when I was doing a research paper on psychopathy, that I had an oh my god moment of realization. Story 38. I was in a lab group with the guy who dressed up as Batman and eliminate a bunch of people in a movie theater. I never realized it. He was worthless as a scientist and didn't make a single contribution all semester. It was to the point that 2 of us in the 4-person group went to the professor. He would just stare blankly when I'd yell at him for not putting in the work. I was patient at first, but it wasn't shyness or even ineptitude. He was just in his own world, and nothing else was real to him. I've met a few more psychopaths and killers since then. When they see a person as a thing, it's like being yelled at by a rock. They don't really see anyone as much more than meat. It was the class where we drilled holes in rat heads to control their brains, so his chosen branch of education wasn't exactly helping his condition. Answer: it was the class where we drilled holes in rat heads to control their brains, so his chosen branch of education wasn't exactly helping his condition? You know he chose that class specifically to be able to do just that, right? You can be certain he checked the curriculum for various fields of study and for areas of specialization to find classes like that, where he could have those kind of outside the norm, normal boundary violating experiences within a socially acceptable framework. I'm not surprised to hear he was useless as a scientist, because I'm sure that's not what he cared about in that class in the least. Story 39. My son. From day one, he was incredibly difficult. He never really had specific cries for things like my other children. I was always guessing what he needed. His sleep was terrible, so my sleep was terrible. He was impossible to teach. He loved to throw toys, so I made a consequence that any toy thrown gets out in timeout. They went in a clear bin. My thinking, being a normal 3-4-year-old, would dislike losing his favorite toys and stop throwing them. Nope, it wasn't even hard to earn them back. I can't recall specifics, but things like getting dressed on time in the morning, brushing teeth, etc. He just didn't care. Then he started torturing animals, but carefully, and his cruelty was always so carefully done that there was never any proof. He was fudge brilliant, reading biology textbooks at 10, that kind of thing. I took him to therapy. I asked for help from the state. I tried to find ways to have him committed, but there was literally nothing I could do. There was one private hospital I found that could take him, and wasn't one of those questionable abusive ranches, but they charged 4x our annual gross income. His dad and I separated so we could keep the kids in separate homes at all times, protecting his siblings as much as we could, though we later found out it was too little too late. Eventually, his siblings reported their abuse in a way that could be prosecuted, and there was enough documentation from the school, and he went to juvenile. I relinquished my parental rights to the state and got restraining orders for the whole household, including the kids too scared to report. It's a horrific thing for a family, and there really isn't any support in the U.S. for those who have to survive it. Answer: man, I wish this is what my mother did instead of helping my brother get away with the shoot he did. He is a prime example of a psychopath, and my mother is a top-tier narcissist. He did all of what you've said and became an extreme intimacy predator by the age of around 6. Like my mother would not do anything but encourage him to be intimacy, as in her words, it's normal boy stuff. My own full-blood brother genuinely trying to get with me and tried to watch my mother have intimacy and wanted to get with her. It was daily for me to be touched and attempted to have intimacy by my brother, and I can't even remember life when I wasn't being touched daily by him. He would watch me shower, get dressed, and would frequently self-care to me. He would follow me, touch me, and start touching himself before loudly listening to adult content and self-care. I can't say enough how extremely low his vow is on women. He believes they are slaves to men, and men should and can do whatever they want, and they have no right to make him do any housework, because that's a woman's job. My mother blamed me for everything he did to me and made my family have an extremely uncomfortable feeling around me. I knew they were talking shit about me and genuinely did not like having me around because of trying to reach out for help. The love bombed him even, and without fail got him whatever he wanted whenever he wanted. In my mother's very own words, I can't have mental disabilities because my brother has them, which she's desperate to say is autism, ADHD, OCD, and some other BS combined that make him mentally ill, but is very, very clearly a psychopath. It's painfully obvious, and he does not hide how he feels about entering. He thinks he is an alpha male and can control everything and do whatever he wants. Entering she didn't like, I couldn't have. But if she'd like it, I could have it. Never got new cloths from her, only my grandma. Most of the time, I had to beg her for more underwear and socks while she poured her money into her son. She never disciplined him, and my whole life I have only seen him once attempting to wash dishes. My mother had to pay him to take showers. She would clean up his room and do his laundry and made me clean up any messes left by him. My brother will trash a room within only a few hours of it being deep clean. His last home he was living in ended up condemned, and all his belongings and his GF's belongings all were dumped due to how bad it was in their home. Not to add, they had a child and almost eliminated due to the severe smell of their house. He heavily abuses his GF and constantly cheats on her. My mother is extremely jealous of me and constantly basically drools over my body because, in her words, I have the body of a model, and genuinely talks a lot about how big my boobs are and how evenly proportioned I am. I've genuinely come to my own conclusion that my mother groomed my brother, and eventually, once he got old enough, ANF hit puberty, started having intimacy with him, as every single thing she does for him and will do for him is downright horrendous and will not disown him because that's her baby boy. No matter what he does or has done, she has always protected him, but caught against me when I tried to get help. I was denied any mental help or care by my own mother until I was in 10th grade, and by the time I saw a psychiatrist, I had went inpatient due to a severe mental break. I was then diagnosed with severe depression and anxiety, PTSD, and pretty bad insomnia. Still told to this day by her, it wasn't that bad. She took to the sky with her son's mental health and prioritized it over everything, and gave him the mindset that he's a mental carrot and needs to be babied at all times. I was her personal maid. She refuses to apologize and always tells me she did her best. When daily I was having breakdowns about being touched in violation by him and begging my mother for any sort of help, and every time I told her any ring, she ignored me, and then later on would encourage him to keep doing it. She is extremely lazy and would lock herself in her room for hours on end when we were in elementary school, and if she didn't see it happen, oh, well, that means it never happened according to her. Every time CPS got involved and I spewed my guts out, my mother talked her way out of it by pure lies. Even had my own grandmother tell the CPS dude in the written report of just being dramatic, and they all know I'm doing this to get him out of the house. In her eyes, she will never be the bad guy, and it will never in her way be her fault. She can even admit to me that her son is a predator to children, and any woman walking and talking while also being so extremely physically abusive and manipulative, and just downright a horrible human who, to a regular person, would want to be rotting in prison and away from harming people. I apologize for the long rant. Seeing this comment makes me feel so warm and happy to see a mother doing the right thing, knowing that's what my mother should have done and still refuses to do. Bless you, ma'am. Story 40. I got so angry I decided to shoot my wife, but then I thought to myself that if I eliminate my wife, my son will be lost in this world, so I have to eliminate him too. I work in inpatient psychiatry. Pro tip, if you ever go to the psych hospital and meet someone and you decide you want to be friends with them on the outside, don't. Answer, male family annihilators are the ultimate narcissists. They see their families as their property and as extensions of their own egos and body. They feel complete ownership over their inner sphere. And when this is threatened, they feel justified in destroying them because in their mind, the other person is tarnishing them and their perfect vision. It's sickening. Story 41. I'm a storm chaser. In 2011, I was with a chase group that got extremely close to the very deadly Joplin tornado. It was a very sobering event. Several days after, was speaking to another member of the group who informed us that the best part of the trip was seeing the town get destroyed. He also cheered watching a different tornado hit a house. Even crazier, his wife cheered too. Two psychopaths and they found each other. Story 42. You realize eventually that they have been lying to you during every single conversation, and when they let the mask slip, you realize that you never should have given them your home address. Story 43. If you're lucky, they leave you alone. If you're not, you're like me and stuck. I swear he literally just talks to see what lies of his people will believe. He is always the victim and never responsible for his own behavior. I started cluing in when he started to mock my empathy for others, but seemed completely devoid of it towards me in private, and would actively try to avoid being so. It's pretty wild. You have a conversation with someone showing sympathy and empathy, and then you hear it coming out of their mouth as if it were their words later. Just paraphrased, being used on another person. It's weird as fudge. It's like they have to copy others' emotions. They really are vibe thieves. I often wonder, if you were to hold a fake funeral but pretended it was real for one of them, had everyone else laughing and being jovial, would they mock that too? Would they follow the room's vibe? Story 44. The sociopath stare is real and happens when you say no or try to enforce a boundary. It's really alarming. Their whole face changes. I get shivers just thinking about it. Story 45. They come with a superficial charm that can be easy to fall for at first and are often master manipulators. They will inflict harm onto others with no guilt or remorse. They are very goal-oriented and will go to unstoppable lengths to achieve their goal. They can be very cold and calculated and easily blend in and wear multiple masks. Once you spend time with them, you see something is missing deep down inside. Story 46. Would never have been able to tell through my interactions with him, and I can't even say for certain that he did have psychopathy or ASPD. I was just a contractor working on his house for an extended period of time. But when I had to go into his casita office to test a line, he had a shelf full of books on psychopathy and ASPD. Lots of stuff like understanding antisocial personality disorder, living with ASPD, all alongside one hell of an arsenal. Not that the guy would need guns. He looked like if Terry Crews could eat Terry Crews for breakfast. Story 47. My mom. She made everyone think she was the best mom in the world. My classmates would say, your mom's so cool, she's great, etc. But behind closed doors, she would sit me down every night for up to 4 hours. I know BC had watched the clock in agony, while she explained what a terrible person I was while reading scripture. She also didn't like our fish tank, so she put a towel over it and waited for the fish to die. Story 48. Demanded we cut open a baby bird and inspect each organ. We were young kids, but still as young as I was, I knew this was something weird to do. Also, the time he hit my back of my head with a huge metal pole in front of my parents. Got knocked. He showed no remorse at all. No idea where he is now, though. Story 49. Their eyes were dead. The first night I met her, I told my friends, she's got dead cow eyes. They thought it was funny, but didn't really understand what I meant. I meant she was a sociopath. I could tell it very obviously somehow. She then entrapped one of my best friends and to this day ruins his life over and over, but he still takes her back. Literally no shame. Did antisocial shoot without really considering the consequences. Victimized people and couldn't tell they were doing it because it felt normal to them. Went to prison. Did hard substances and drank the whole way through a pregnancy. Captured men and then used them until they weren't of use anymore. Cheated constantly. My friend is like a shell of a person, and they were divorced and still get back together frequently. She just uses him up for money and support until she gets bored and then moves in with someone else. Then they get sick of her, so she gets back with my friend again. It's sick. Being in the same room with her is like knowing there's a cobra crawling around, but not knowing exactly where. Psychopaths will give you the creeps. Story 50. My friend's child. When our kids were in elementary school, I met another parent and we became fast friends. Adored my new friend and our kids were the same ages. My kids, social and friendly, didn't love going to play dates with her kids. She had a crazy tall staircase, like a story, and a half, one long, straight run. The kids' playroom was at the top. I was halfway up the stairs to check on them. My daughter was standing at the top looking down at me. My angle kept me out of sight from the playroom, and I saw my friend's son sneaking behind her, maniacal expression of glee as he was about to shove her down the stairs. I yelled, he startled, and then reset his face. I saw him transform from evil to cute kid. I grabbed my kids and never talked to her again. I was afraid to have my kids in his presence, and the sweet mother would never believe what I saw. I tried a million times to figure out how to explain my actions, but couldn't bring myself to do it. Answer: this is my story too. She was a very good friend. Her son was 12 years older than my kids, who at that time were age 1 and 3. On different occasions, I caught him: 1, aiming a Nerf gun at my baby daughter's head when she was crawling on the floor. 2, he opened a forbidden gate at my son's birthday party to lead all the children out to the 80 kph road. And 3, took my toddler son to a pond when nobody was looking. My son could have drowned. His mother always insisted her son was so good with children. And when I acted horrified one of the above incidents, she just kept praising her son for having been brave enough to tell us the truth about what happened. I cut her right out of my life. Story 51. My brother is diagnosed as a psychopath. He ended up being a serial killer. Our family knew something was wrong with him. He just had zero moral compass. He enjoyed harming others, compulsively lied. You name it. He just lacked any empathy and had zero impulse control. Story 52. One of the psychopaths I met, I knew he was off because I always felt like I was talking to a hollow shell. He had no emotions whatsoever, no excitement, energy, just like a strange, hollow human body with nothing inside it. I met him about 5 times across 2 different countries. He tried to sell me a club in Singapore at the Marina Bay Sands. Total scam. Then he created a music concert, which was a total scam, and fled back to Japan. He never felt any sort of empathy, but he just lied and manipulated people like a lizard playing with insects. I saw him a few years later on Japanese TV. He beat a GF to passing, and the CCTV footage showed him taking the body to the sea in Yokohama and dumping it tied to a cinder block. There was footage of the police walking him away, and he had the same bored, bland, emotionless expression he always had. Story 53. My ex bit my ear off and never apologized, although given plenty of chances. He then used every excuse to explain away what he did because it was something I did wrong. Story 54. Dead eyes. Not tired or blank or dissociated eyes, but just nothing there. Nothing behind their eyes at all. Not a spark of humanity, not even a glimmer of malicious or ill intent. Just completely dead. It was a group introduction, and I introduced myself not to seem rude and promptly went to another room. Story 55. Not a psychologist, but my cousin enjoyed humiliating other children when he was just a child. As a late teen young adult, he clipped the tattoo out of his ex's skin with a nail clipper. Had many pet snakes, really enjoyed feeding it, even went as far as buying pet rabbits and pretending to be this forever home. When he was planning on feeding it, he laughed his jerk off about this man cuddling with his rabbits the last time. Had rats, some he kept as pets and some were meant to feed the snakes. He bullied a rat mother if she tried to get away from her babies for a second and punched the poor animal. It died eventually. He had another mother and she had to feed 20-something rats. Half of them weren't hers. Same thing. Ended up letting his girlfriend bottle feed the rats. His little brother confessed that at some point he had 5 cats in his room and he'd let them get pregnant all the time. If he couldn't sell the kittens, he'd just eliminate them. I once planned to buy a puppy somewhere. Beautiful puppy. My grandparents lost their freaking minds over it because it was a very big breed and had no papers. They said if it wasn't from a good breeder, it was basically a takedown machine, and they talked me out of it. I had, however, already taken a picture of it. This was 10 years ago, and I recently recognized the picture I took on Marketplace. My cousin is still trying to scam people with the picture I took of that dog. I know it was him because he used his dad's account. Lots of other examples. My family always knew. I used to tell them it was just a child, and he would get over it and not to be so dramatic about their own cousin. But yeah, they were right. He's an adult now. Story 56. When he got hard every time I cried, my lupus got really bad. So bad I had to do chemo and lost a very dangerous amount of weight. My cries of pain would make his male body part hard. I was insecure and didn't think anyone else would ever love me, so I gaslit myself into being flattered by it. I wish I could hit past me with a frying pan. Story 57. My aunt. Growing up with her, it was just, oh, that's just Aunt R. I didn't realize that my instinct to never believe her was because she was a dangerous psychopath narcissist. Like, oh, she tells you to come give her a hug because you've got her blood running through your veins. But you can feel that she doesn't actually love you. She just wants to reinforce that family connection. Nothing ever felt genuine from her. Ever. She was always only halfway interested in anything, it seemed. then noticing that my cousins were always made to stay in their rooms and play quietly, then noticing that she was always so rude to waitstaff and customer service people. I dislike being out in public with her. And like, why is my 8-year-old cousin teaching me to pluck my eyebrows the way her mom taught her? Because my aunt told her she was ugly and needed to fix her unibrow if she was ever going to catch a man at 8 years old. When I was in high school, she disappeared. We thought her husband eliminated her. She popped back up again in California a week or two later with some biker guys she knew from high school. She came back for her youngest child and to sign divorce papers, and then she and her son went back TK California for maybe 6 months to live with that guy before he got sick of her and sent them both back. Apparently, it was pretty bad. My cousin was very young, but said it was an outlaw MC, and he was basically left to his own devices while his mom got fudge up and partied with him. There were lots of small, awful things she did, like shutting her car door on my other aunt's dog and breaking its neck. But the next truly awful thing she did is ignoring the signs of abuse on a little girl she was babysitting who was later taken down by her abuser. This was probably a decade after the California incident. She was remarried, and her husband had 2 daughters, B and H, and 2 granddaughters, C and A. She used to babysit the granddaughters. One spring, B, the mother of both granddaughters, started dating a new guy. He was on meth. The mother B started doing meth. He told B that they should split childcare duties to make things easier. He said she should take care of the older one, A, and he would take care of the little one, C, who was just 2 years old. Long story, less long. During the weeks that he was caring for her, he was actually doing extremely fudge-up shoot to her that left behind physical evidence that anyone else caring for her would have seen. A few weeks into this arrangement, the boyfriend take down C. My aunt told my mom after the fact that she had noticed things like C was missing toenails or had rectangle patches of skin missing from duct tape being pulled off, and she didn't think anything of it. Her and her husband tried to get custody or visitation rights for the older granddaughter, but the judge was so appalled that my aunt had had the opportunity to help and chose not to do anything that he denied their request and said, as Biodad could decide at his own discretion how much access they would have to her. Shortly after all of this, her marriage had reached the minimum length of time to be considered for equal marital assets or whatever for a divorce, meaning she would entitled to half even if she came into the marriage with nothing. She filed for divorce and accused her now ex-husband of really harrowing abuse, which was fortunately easily disproved, but she still ended up with a chunk of that poor man's retirement. When her oldest child finally went NC with her, she teamed up with his psycho ex to attempt to fabricate evidence that my cousin was intimacy abusing his own daughter. That ended up with my aunt receiving some sort of official censure. My cousin was granted full legal and physical custody, and his ex's parental rights were terminated. This is the end of much more complicated saga, but this is the only part that psycho narc aunt was involved in. My mom cut her off around this time, and all 3 of her kids have gone no contact with her, so I don't know most of the smaller crazy shit she did. A lot of threatening to ruin people's lives, a lot of trying to coerce money from people. She was fired as a patient from a couple of doctors' offices, which I think is hilarious. The most recent really bad thing I know of is that she burned down her house while her most recent husband was asleep inside of it. She was frying Brussels sprouts when supposedly the grease popped and caught the curtains on fire. Thank God the smoke alarm woke her husband up and he made it out okay. But yeah, she burned it down for insurance money. Anyway, that's what a psychopath looks like when they aren't in the news and aren't serial killers and aren't smart enough to fake normalcy. She's miserable and alone now. She creates fake social media profiles to try to stalk the entire family. She uses elderly family members to try to guilt people into talking to her. She threatens to destroy everyone's lives pretty regularly. When we have funerals or weddings or parties, we have to guard the details to try to prevent her from showing up. Occasionally, she tries to send my kids gifts. It's weird. My whole life, the identifying characteristics that I have always associated with her, literally since childhood, are performative and empty. There's literally nothing to her other than scheming. No care, no genuine interests or hobbies, just pure self-interest and nothing else. You can feel the difference. Edit. I just remembered the time Aunt's daughter went NC with her, so she tried to break apart my cousin's marriage, destroy her relationship with her in-laws, and contacted CPS multiple times trying to get my cousin's kids taken away. Edit 2 with a few more details and copy-pasting from another comment just because she was just so casually cruel. She used to run over animals in the road all the time. She would always say, "What? I didn't want to swerve or slam on the brakes and cause an accident." I've overheard her making fun of my little cousin when she had lice and her stepdad shaved her head. She has abandoned her kids, She went after my other aunt aggressively in the immediate aftermath of the deaths of not just one, but two of my other aunt's children. She supposedly was asking around trying to take a hit on her own daughter after she testified against her in a civil thing. She does not give a fudge. Literally at all. It's scary. Oh, even as a toddler, she tried to eliminate my mom multiple times. They're 2 years apart. When my mom was an infant, my grandma would find my aunt doing crazy shit like trying. Thank you for watching the video all the way to the end. If you'd like to see more content like this, you might be interested to know that I've created another channel with a similar theme, especially for those of you who enjoy what I do. I'll leave a link in the description, and I hope to see you there. Take care.